Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unfiltered Flow ELSC, the podcast dedicated to the progression of the fluid power and automation industries. I'm Megan Cook, that's Alan Burdett, and today is our pleasure to welcome Ms. Nikki Baird to the show. Nikki is the Senior Director of Procurement at Tadano Mantis. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. Nice to be here.
So, Nikki, let's start here. How did you end up in procurement in manufacturing? Did you set out down that path, or is it something that you discovered along the way?
So I definitely did not set out along this path. I was actually going to school to work in medical administration. So I wanted to work at a hospital. I wanted to be a big executive there. I did an internship and I absolutely hated it. I was close to the end of my college career, so I needed to do something. So I ended up applying for a job at a manufacturing site close to my home as a customer service rep. And I took a part time job there just because I needed something. After about 2 years, I really liked it. So I decided that it was probably a good space for me to be in and kind of worked my way up from there.
So, what does your role look like today, Nikki, and what does your day to day entail?
So there isn't really a day to day. I'm putting out a lot of fires. I'm dealing with a lot of shortages. I'm dealing with price increases, looking at the market when it comes to different aspects of purchasing, steel, what's going on in the freight sector. So I'm actually gathering a lot of information on a daily basis. I also have a small team that reports to me. So I'm dealing with, anywhere that they need me to kind of step in and be the title that kind of push back on some of our vendors. I'm dealing with our operations, our engineering team. So, my job really just entails of keeping the train on the track and making sure that we're moving forward and being able to get all the parts there in the time that we need to build. I'm also responsible for making sure that our plan for sales and our manufacturing line up. So I take, what sales says they're going to sell and what we can produce and kind of help facilitate that as well. So I do a lot of stuff every day. There's not a day that looks the same.
Right. So, no stress at all. Easy peasy.
Not at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Deadlines for shortages. Well,
Yeah.
and so now that we're on here, the how has the supply chain disruptions and the tariffs impacted you in this last year and a half year?
So I always kind of go back when people kind of ask me about, the market, I always kind of go back to COVID. Because I really feel like COVID is what set the bar for where we are now in supply chain. It used to be as the customer, you could go to any vendor. If it was on the shelf, they would give it to you. I use hand sanitizer because whoever thought that hand sanitizer would be, something that we all fought over in the market, right? But we were looking to buy hand sanitizer by the drums because that was what you needed in order to be able to bring your people in. And you used to be able to go to anybody who sold hand sanitizer and they would give it to you. And once COVID hit, the roles reversed. The vendors very much had the power because they were holding, the gold, which was hand sanitizer. And it really never changed. COVID really set this bar where you had to build relationships with vendors and you had to make sure that you weren't just buying a little here and a little there. Now, fast forward, we're at tariffs and, they're changing every single day. There's not a common you don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow even, and so we're trying to forecast how it's going to impact our business because it very much does. We're taking the brunt of those costs on, and it's really really hard to forecast because you build a model and you're like, okay, this is what it's going to look like for this specific territory, and then 2 days from now it'll be like, well, there's a NAIPA now here that's 50% more than it was, a month ago, and so it's an all day job and it takes a lot of people to manage it.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. I
And I
remember
don't think it's
this is
going away.
probably no, no, I don't think it is
It's
either. I think the challenges will remain,
Yeah,
certainly.
it won't maybe be a tariff, it'll just be the norm. So it's something that, there's always disruptions in supply chains and it's never consistent. So it's right now it's tariffs. We just wait for the next one.
Right. Yeah, I remember this is pre-COVID, probably 2019 days. I was out on a customer visit and we went out into the shop and literally all these vats of hand sanitizer. I said, hand sanitizer? I didn't even know that was something that you sold. He said, oh, yeah. And I said, those are massive containers. Well, then fast forward to 2020, COVID time, and I'm thinking they are sitting on the gold. They can
Yes, yeah.
charge whatever they want for these vats of hand sanitizer.
I will say when I started down my supply chain career, I never thought that I'd be fighting for masks and hand sanitizer. So, it's always something.
Well, and that brings up a point I wanted to ask about. As you've gotten into this and you've seen a lot of different things happen here, what what part of the procurement business has surprised you the most? Is it a hand sanitizer or something else?
That was definitely a surprise. But as supply chain as a whole, I think what really shocked me is that supply chain was one of those things where it was really kind of unheard of. I've been in my career almost 19 years, and in the beginning of my career, it's almost kind of unheard of. It was like you had the purchasing people, they were making sure stuff was coming in. But supply chain, I feel like, has really developed over the last 15 years. And I really feel like it's because we saw this huge need to build relationships with our suppliers. But I think what really surprises me, in specifically to supply chain, is that we're the people that they come to when they want to save money. If everything is going great, they kind of just leave us alone. But the minute there's a ripple in the supply chain, or a ripple in profits, they come to supply chain and go, we need to save money. We need to do this. We need to switch suppliers. Supply chain is really almost the backbone of making sure that you can produce on time. So we're the ones that are controlling the purse strings, essentially. We're the ones that are making sure things are coming in. So that was really surprising to me when I first started my career, because it was almost like a light switch where I was in such a there was such a need for what I was doing. And 3 years before that, we were looking great. Everything was wonderful. And nobody really came to me and asked me to do anything. It was just like, keep buying what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. But then there was a need to be like, wow, look at cost, look at how look at the freight, look at all these things that we're doing, and micromanage it. So that was a huge shock when I first started.
So, your experience, you've been doing this for quite some time now, Nikki.
Have.
So, what has your experience been like as a woman in manufacturing?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So, I have been with Tadano Mantis for about 3 years, a little over 3 years, and this is the first time in my career that I really feel like being a female doesn't really matter. I am respected just like all of the male counterparts that I work with, and it feels great. Prior to that, starting my career, I remember walking into a negotiation, and I introduced myself, and the guy said, well, I'd like a cup of coffee, please. And I was like, I mean, there's a coffee machine out there, sure, go ahead. And he just kind of looked at me like, I don't really want to work with what, why are you here? And I was like, well, I've taken over your category. And he just was not willing to engage with me at all. He had no want or need to deal with me. And the funny thing is at the end of this contract that we were negotiating, he said, man, he's like, you were the toughest that I've ever had. And I said, yeah, well, you walked in and you didn't really seemed to think that I was going to do much. So, I had to prove myself to myself, really. I had to prove that I could do it, because that was something that I saw quite a bit when I first started my career. But luckily, I had strong females that I worked with. So I kind of mimicked what they were doing. I watched how they were interacting with our male counterparts at the time, or even most salesmen at the time were obviously men. So we're really trying to figure out how to work with them. And now, fast forward, I don't see that as much. Like, no one, I can't even tell you the last time I saw someone or met with someone who was stunned by the fact that I was a woman. So it's really
Mhm.
evolved. It's a great thing.
When he gave you the compliment, you should have said, "Thank you. I would like a cup of coffee, please."
I actually,
It's right there
s-
around the corner. Cream
And
and sugar.
yeah, somewhere in the conversation, he mentioned to me that he thought women were emotional. And I was like, there's only one person leaving crying. It won't be me. I can guarantee that. And he just kind of looked at me, and I was like, are you ready to proceed?
Ah.
So, yeah,
and
it's
well,
definitely gotten better. And that's wonderful.
Mhm.
so you talk about dealing with salespeople, and I imagine you deal with a lot of engineers too. something you wish that engineers or salespeople knew about your profession?
So actually, one of my best friends is an engineer. And I always joke with her that we're supposed to be like nemesis because, engineers want you to build whatever they want specifically for like the cheapest price. And so I always say to her, I just wish you guys would understand that we can't get what you've dreamed up for pennies on the dollar. So that is something that I always kind of joke about. It's like, in procurement, you want us to buy this giant piece for $1 and it's just not feasible. So I always kind of wish that they would understand that it's not as easy as what they've conceptualized in their head. Like it's a lot of work for procurement to work with the vendors and get price points. And there's a lot of work that goes into it too, especially because I'm not the one who designed it. So I have no idea, you know, what the price point should be until you actually give me the design. And now I'm going and talking to vendors, and it's sometimes really hard to do because it's not my idea. So I have no idea where what the price is going to be initially. But I mean, for the most part, my all of the engineers I've ever worked with and the salespeople have been really great and understanding. So as long as we work together and talk about it, we usually don't have any issues in the end.
Good. So, what strengths do you think women in general bring to both procurement and manufacturing as a whole, Nikki?
Women have a really great strength because we're usually tasked with handling all of the stuff at home, right? So we do most of the grocery shopping and most of the buying in our everyday lives. So we kind of already understand what we need to look at when it comes to saving money and what some of the important things are that we need to focus on. So one of the strengths that we have is just those everyday tasks that we do really can blend into procurement. As well as, we have the strength, I believe, of we understand how to say no in an aspect of, no, that's not going to work. And it really does come with age, I think, and experience. But I know a lot of women who really grow in procurement because they they have a family, they have to tell their kids, no, we can't do it this way. And sometimes that's how you have to interact. Another strength is, women really have the ability to look outside the box. They have families and full time jobs, and they have to figure out how to move all these pieces so that they can go to their job, to go to their kid's soccer game, go to basketball. And procurement's very similar. You have a problem and you have to figure out how do you fix that. And there's no standard, A to B. You can go from A to Z to D to E. There's just, you have to be able to think outside the box. And I think that a lot of women really possess that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's that's an excellent point actually. I never really thought about it that way, but I do tell my husband and daughter no all the time,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, just,
There's
it's not going to work. You know, we can't
Right.
be at a soccer game and be at a dinner at 6 o'clock. We have to, no, we can't do that. But what we can do is this. And that is something that procurement is really, I've always said, if you are someone who thinks that 1 plus 1 equals 2 and that's it, don't work in procurement. Don't plan a career in procurement because there's nothing about procurement that is ever the same. It can be the exact same problem, but it cannot be solved the same way. And so you have to learn how to say, no, that won't work, but we can try this in a professional way.
Well, you brought up a good point there too, the work-life balance, especially wife, family. How has that been for you throughout your career and to where you are now?
So when I first started my career, it was a different time. I think that women were less valuable in the workforce because of that specific reason. It was like, well, she's got to leave early to take her kids to the doctor, or she wants to go to a basketball game, even though at the same time I had a lot of my male counterparts who were coaching their kids baseball or coaching their softball. And it was like, oh no, that's fine. You know what? Not only is it great that you can leave at 3, but we'll sponsor your team. So in the beginning, it was really hard to balance my young family. Now I work from home. I work for a great company. They understand that everybody has a life and that, work can sometimes be done from 6 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock, or, even at night. I work a lot of nights and weekends now. My children are older, so I have that ability. But I think we have learned with COVID too that you can be more flexible. People can work from home. They can work a hybrid schedule. They can, work 410s and still get everything done that needs to be done. So we've really evolved in that space, especially in manufacturing.
So, Nikki, what advice would you give to someone who's wanting to get into procurement in manufacturing, and maybe in general terms, and then maybe specifically for a female that wants to do?
Yeah. So in general terms, I would say do it. I mean, if you hate it, you can always go somewhere else. I never thought I'd end up in manufacturing. I actually thought I was going to work in the medical field. That's what surrounded me in the area that I live. I'm very glad that I did it. I had, women specifically in my career that have pushed me. One of my, well, she was a coworker, was looking for someone in procurement, and she said, "Hey, I think you'd be great at it." I never thought about doing it. And I'm glad she did because here I am, 14 years later, 15 years later, and I've really grown in that career. So you just never know where life's going to take you. So let people kind of influence you if you feel that they're a good person to be following. Let them influence you into trying new things and being there for you. Specifically for women, here's the one thing that I think that we really need to focus on as women if you want to get into procurement. Confidence is the number one. You have to have confidence. You have to walk into the room and you have to believe in yourself and you have to be confident that you can speak in the same sort of setting as a male counterpart. I think we as women kind of feel like we can't do those things, but I think as I've grown in my career, I've learned that confidence is really everything. And then second to that is learning how to negotiate. Ask the questions. If you're told no, it's okay. All right, well, what about this? So we just need to have the confidence to ask for what we want. And once you do that, you really will be successful in procurement.
What keeps you excited on the daily, working in a manufacturing environment and then supply chain overall? Considering the stress level, Nikki, because I know, Alan and I have a good friend that is responsible for procurement on the manufacturing side. And so we know the amount of stress that's carried daily. So what
Yeah.
keeps you very engaged and excited to do this?
Well, a couple of things. One is the wins, you know, getting those wins, getting the small wins, whether it's getting a part that you didn't think you were going to get on time or negotiating a contract. Like, I love those things. I really live for that. I love the wins, but I also love the people that I work with. That makes me excited as well. Just to watch the people that I have underneath me that I'm managing grow and to watch their minds kind of just expand. I love to watch that. I never really thought I would like being a manager, but it turns out that it is one of the things that I like in my job, especially with the team that I have. I also just really like to see how we come together as a whole, how what I do, what engineering does and manufacturing does, how that kind of comes together with this giant crane that you get to stand out and look at to go to Con Expo, and we got to just see the people who were just in awe of the things that we do. And that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, it is cool to see the finished product like that for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm driving is I point out all the cranes on the roads, and my whole family is so sick of it. But I'm like, that's one of our cranes. And it's just a really cool feeling. It's like you never really thought when I was 18, 19 years old that I'd be like, one day I'm going to work for a crane manufacturer and I'm going to get really excited when I see that out in the real world. And I do every single time. I like to count them and I like to be like, oh, I saw it at this project. So, you know, just working for a team and watching what you do come to life is just such a cool feeling.
So you've touched on this a little bit, but what piece of advice would you give a young woman coming into the industry, manufacturing? Let's just say manufacturing as a whole. What piece of advice would you give?
Trust your gut, listen to other females in your space, find someone who you look up to and who you respect. One of the other things that I would give specifically to women, but just people in general, is learn from everybody. Whether it's a negative or a positive, you just learn from everybody. Take in everything that you see and apply that in your life. If you don't like the way someone manages, don't do that. If you love how, I used to have a supervisor who every day she'd walk around and just say, like, good morning, how are you? And it would just made a really big impact on how I was as a manager. On the flip side of that, I had a manager who micromanaged everything I did. And s- at that time hated my job because it was just like I felt like I could never do enough. Right. So I had to learn to trust myself and know when I needed to stand up and say, like, this isn't right. Or, say, I don't really like the way that we're moving right now, or we should try going this way. Like, have your own voice, but find someone who you can look up to and learn from everybody. That's my main advice for anyone in manufacturing, but it's specifically women, because a lot of times we don't trust our own voices and we don't trust our own thoughts. And we want to make our own way, which is great. And we should absolutely make our own way, but always draw experiences from other people and especially other women in the field that you're in.
Oh, Nikki, thank you so much. It's been great having you on. Alan, well, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. It was so great
Yeah,
to
it
have
sure
you.
has.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. Very appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for what you guys are doing. Keep it up because it is really an important message for women and young women specifically to see what's going on in manufacturing and to look at that as a career. I don't think it's something we're sold. As young girls, we're not said, "Well, you can go into manufacturing." It's just kind of like this unheard of field that you don't know about, and you can build an amazing career. So I appreciate you guys having me on and letting me share my story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. Typically, those of us that ended up in it fell in it one way or the other,
Yeah.
never really set out to do it.
Yeah.
And you fall in love with it once you're in.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the truth.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Too.